Hello guys, there are 5 huge gearing mistakes that a lot of players, including myself, are making right now in Diablo 4, and it's costing you a ton of gold and a ton of time. And there's a lot of things that people don't understand about the gearing system because it is kind of complicated, and there's a lot of things that people think are true that are really wrong. So I'm going to go over those 5 huge mistakes and help you make your character the most powerful that he can actually be, because there are a lot of things that you can mess up on. Now, the first big mistake I see a lot of people make is regarding imprinting and extracting aspects, especially for lower level characters. I know myself and other people with lower level characters are kind of confused not only by the system, but whether or not to save aspects, use aspects in certain conditions, etc. So I'm going to tell you right now, if you are lower levels, being level 1 through level 50, make sure you are putting aspects on your gear. I don't care if they're good rolls, bad rolls, but make sure you're putting them on your gear because they make you so much more powerful and they make you able to go through the early game content much quicker. Just as a walkthrough, if you're not familiar with the Codex of Power, these are aspects that can be obtained from completing dungeons on the map. These have infinite uses. This means no matter how many pieces of gear you try and imprint these on, you can use them at any given time. The only caveat with these is they will have the lowest percentage roll that they have on them because they are infinite use. So if you get a 3 to 10% item, it will always give you 3% if you imprint via the Codex of Power. Or if you have an item such as this legendary, you can see the roll is 30 to 34%. If you were to use the Codex of Power, it would be a 30% roll, but since it's a random dungeon item, we got a 34% roll on it. So if you want to take this item and use that aspect on, let's say, this staff, so you can get this better roll on this weapon that you're currently using, all you have to do is go to the Extract Aspect tab, throw this on here. You can extract this aspect from the weapon to be able to put it on another weapon type of your choosing. And even if you're lower level, instead of just not imprinting aspects at all because you're worried about it or it's confusing or whatever the case may be, you always have the option to just use the Codex of Power here and imprint certain aspects that will give you huge benefits to your build. As an example, I'll use this lower level amulet. Now, a lot of this gear you're going to replace very frequently, but it is very cheap to imprint these aspects, so very important aspects you should always have on your build. For instance, as a lower level sorcerer, any damage reduction I can get is extremely important, and if you put this, for instance, on your amulet, it's called the Aspect of the Protector. It gives you a barrier absorbing up to 450 damage, and if you look, that's well over half our health. That gives us a huge health boost automatically so that we can survive a lot more fights, and it'll probably keep me from dying like 60% or 70% less in the campaign and save me a ton of time that way. And again, upon selecting it, it's very cheap. It's only 17,000 gold. So if you're lower level, imprint aspects on your build because it turns you from a lower level build into an actual powerful character at those lower levels. And additionally, one of the big things you always want to make sure to do is go ahead into the options, into the gameplay settings, and turn on this advanced tooltip information. That's going to show you all of the percentages that are available for these weapons and show the roll ranges that you can actually hit. Another important thing is if you come across an aspect at lower levels, such as let's say this one, keep in mind I'm level 54, but this percentage roll is 3 to 8%, and you can see this item is a level 30 item. I got it at level 30 and extracted the aspect. Now, these aspects can be used on later tier gear. We've already tested it. So if you do get a good roll and you don't want to use it right early on because it's a max roll aspect, absolutely extract it from that piece of gear and save it, because most of the time for aspects like these, you can save them and use them on later tier gear, and they still apply to later tier gear. A lot of people seem to think that just because you get this at a lower level, you can't put it on higher level sacred or ancestral gear. That's just not true. You can apply it to higher gear, so save your max roll or high roll aspects if you want to use them for later in game. Another big thing here is if you get a very good aspect roll and you want to imprint it on an item, you can most certainly throw the item in there and imprint that aspect on it. But you do want to be careful if it's a very good aspect for one reason, and that's because you can only apply the imprint once. You can see this sword right here is an imprinted item. I have imprinted an aspect on it manually, so it has that aspect attached to it now. Now, if you think you can just go and imprint this and then go and extract it back from the item to get it back and keep putting it on gear, you cannot do that. You can see it's gray right here. It's grayed out because it's already imprinted. And no matter what you do, you can't drag it over here because it's imprinted manually with aspects. So if you're going to imprint an aspect on a piece of gear, make sure it's the one you want and to keep it on, because you can only imprint an aspect one time and then it is gone forever. However, if you're not trying to get this aspect out of this piece of gear, for instance, you can see my whirlwind critical chance increased is by 8%. If I find an aspect that's better than that, you can imprint over that aspect. So before I show you that this does imprint over it, one important thing to keep note of here is that if you look at the allowed item types, for instance, two-handed weapon, the power is increased for two-handed weapons by 100% and amulets by 50%. So you can see this sword right here has a range of 6 to 16% of critical strike chance increase, but this aspect only has 3 to 8. If you increase that by 100%, the range from 3 to 8 goes to 6 to 16. Because it goes on a two-handed weapon, the power is increased by 100. It just tells you that, but it is important to keep that in mind because whether you put it on that or an amulet, you're going to get an increase from the aspect itself. So you can see the critical strike increase chance is by 8. And if we want to use this aspect, which is better overall, then we can actually imprint over that weapon, even though it already has an imprinted aspect on it. And it'll increase that from 8% and 24% to 14% and 42%. So keep that in mind. You can't take an imprinted item out of a weapon after you've already imprinted it, but you can imprint over it if you do find a better one. The second biggest mistake I see a lot of people making, and that I made quite a lot, is using your gems. So if you're like me, you have a ton of gems stacked in here and you're hoarding them in here until you get like 1,000,000 of each kind, and then which you'll never pick up any ever again. One important thing with gems is you should always be putting them in your gear. Always, whether you're lower level, higher level, if you have a slot in your gear, you should put a gem in it regardless of what it is at all. And this is because obviously the gems give you certain benefits. If it's a higher level gem, you get much higher benefits. For instance, emeralds, 9% critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. If I had that in all my weapons, which I do, it gives me a much higher critical strike damage to those enemies and gives me a lot more power and a lot more DPS on a ton of enemies. The same goes for different gems that you can put in your gear. Now, the main reason you should always put these items in your gear is because you never actually lose them. So what I mean by that is if you see this piece of gear right here, let's just take this random sword. If we want to actually put this emerald in the sword, we now have that great benefit on the sword itself. Now, if you want to go and unsocket this gem, it's annoying. You have to go to the jeweler, you have to click unsocket, 689,000 gold. We unsocket it, we lose well over 20,000 gold, and then it takes up inventory space again, blah, 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 right? And not that it's a big deal, but it's an annoying process. So some people just don't slot gems because they have to do that. The good thing about this is you can actually get those gem benefits. Now, generally, the only time you take this gem out of this piece of gear is if you find a better piece of gear and you're going to put that new gem inside of it. Now, instead of actually going and extracting that and it costing you money and just being annoying, one important thing here you can do is just actually take it to the blacksmith. If you want, you can just salvage this sword itself, and when you salvage it for free, you get back the gem. You get the gem back for completely free with no cost. And anytime you find a new piece of gear and have to salvage it because you found a better one, you'll take it more than likely to salvage. And when you do salvage it, you'll get that gem back and you can just slot it back into whatever, new slot on that piece of gear that you have. So that keeps it from being annoying. And because of the huge benefits you get, regardless of what level you are, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever kind of gem you have, make sure every gem slot has something in it because it makes you that much better overall. The third mistake is not paying close enough attention to your affixes. You can see on this sword, I have a 1412 damage per second, and this other sword that I just found, it gives me a plus 140 damage per second. Now, obviously, when you look directly at the sword, you look at it and say, this does a lot higher DPS. We should be using this sword on our build. And while generally that's true, it's not necessarily true. As you can see, the benefits we get on the sword are 25% critical strike damage, which matches my current sword. Those are permanently on the sword forever. So right now that's fair. Plus 27% damage to close enemies, 92 strength, and 20% damage over time. Now the big thing about my barbarian is this sword has stats on it that benefit me every single time almost that I hit an enemy. 32% damage to injured, 19% damage to bleeding, and 33% chance to stunned. And most of the time enemies are at least one or two of these, if not all of them. So I get all of these bonus percentages to my attack. And those percentages by itself are well over 100, 110, 120 percentage bonus points to my actual damage. And that's stuff that I would miss out on if I went with this sword just because this sword said it had higher DPS. So one thing to keep in mind is before you find an item and just throw it on because it has plus and it's green and it's better than your current item, make sure you check the affixes of your build, because overall, if all of the affixes on your build line up, if you stack all of those stats on top of each other and each piece of gear has those and they can stack over and over and over again. You get huge damage bonuses this way, and affixes can make you go from dealing regular damage to 200 or 300% extra damage on top of the damage you're already doing. So make sure you pay attention to those and not just throw on random gear that seems to look better. Mistake number 4 is enchanting affixes. This is a big thing that either people just don't do at all, or they don't exactly know how it works, and so they end up wasting a lot of gold trying to set items up the way that they want them. So before I get into the items themselves, the way these items work are based off item power level. So there's essentially 6 different breakpoint tiers, and I'll throw those on the screen now. That shows an item power range. So if your item power range on that actual piece of gear are between these sets of numbers, it puts it in essentially a tier, which affects the range the affixes actually have. So you can see one of the tiers is tier 4, which goes from 460 to 624. If we take, for instance, this particular polearm, that's 613 item power level, you can see the percentage ranges right there. We'll just use the first one for example, the 28% damage to injured enemies. That's 26% to 40%. So what we're going to do is throw this item in here, and we're going to go ahead and upgrade it once. That's going to bring it to a 618 item power. So we're going to upgrade that. And then once we upgrade it, it's now going to be a 618 item power. So the next upgrade, it's going to go to a 623 item power. So we're going to upgrade it one more time. And now our current percentage is 31.2% to 48% on that damage to injured enemies. This is where the tier system comes in, and you want to make sure you're paying attention to it because you can get a lot more damage on your gear this way. And it's sometimes a really big difference. So we're going to go from 623 item power level, and our next upgrade is going to push us up 10 more points past that 624 tier to put us in that breakpoint tier 5. And when we actually do that, what it's going to do is take that 31.2 to 48%. And since we're in that new item tier level, it's going to take it from a minimum of 31.2 to a minimum now of 39% and a maximum of 65%. That 65% maximum is like 17 points higher than the previous maximum, which is a huge range difference and a huge deal because you get much bigger bonuses after you start leveling this gear, after it starts crossing those item power level tiers. Now this is a big deal because if you have gear that is right on one of the lines of one of these tiers, you need to make sure you upgrade it so it crosses that tier level because you get much bigger benefits from it, and your affix ranges go a lot higher when you go to these new item level tiers. And again, I'll throw these up on the screen one more time, but make sure if you have an item that's close, you're moving it to that next item level tier. And that's why it appears that gear and the percentages get higher as you go along, because that gear is breaking into new tiers over and over and over as you level up. Now, since we've already talked about how important the affixes are, you want to make sure you have affixes on your gear that are always contributing to your build. So you can go into the cultist and actually enchant these, but a lot of people make certain mistakes when doing so. So you really want to make sure there's at least a couple stats on this piece of gear that you want on your build, because you don't want to have to replace all of these because it becomes extremely expensive. Some people go in here and want to just replace everything and find better stats for everything, but I'm telling you right now, you really don't want to do that unless you just have a ton of money to waste, because as you can see right here, it only costs 21,333 for the first replacement of an affix. So you pick the one that you don't want. For instance, we'll just go with rank of kick because we don't use that on our build. We'll enchant it, and then what will happen is we will get to pick an actual affix that then belongs to this new piece of armor in place of the old one. So for instance, we'll just pick +9 to all stats, or replace that affix, and then all of a sudden it has that on it instead of the old one that we no longer needed. Now the big thing is, if you get this roll and you don't like it, or you have to enchant the item again, or if you want to replace the other 2 stats as well, this is going to go up to 106,000, so that's a huge increase. And then if you keep on doing this over and over and over, it's going to require more material and more gold overall to enchant, to the point sometimes it can get to like 500,000 or 1,000,000 gold to enchant this item, and it's not worth it anymore. So make sure you enchant just the spots that you want, especially early on, because it does get very expensive, and I've seen people spend a lot of gold on this for no reason, just because they thought they could replace all of them, and it wouldn't be any more expensive that way. Now finally, the 5th mistake I see people is not knowing when to enchant, when to use aspects on their gear, etc. Especially if you're early on in the game and you're worried about, should I go ahead and do it, should I not? This is what I'm going to tell you. Level 1 to 50. Don't necessarily worry about upgrading your gear. You can if you want. It's fun to do it. If you want, go for it. No harm, no foul. However, if you are level 1 to 50, put aspects on your gear. Don't worry about the gold right yet. Put aspects on your gear because it's going to help you do much better early game, get through the content, and it's going to make the gameplay that much more enjoyable, and it's going to overall help your build out tremendously. But overall, just have fun with your build and experiment with it. The one thing I will say about aspects early on in the game is make sure if you do get a very high or max roll, just to consider at least extracting that and saving it for end game if you want, because those rolls do apply to end game gear. They don't change based off of the later gear not accepting it or anything like that. So once you get to level 50, make sure you get at least level 50 gear in all of your slots, and at that point then you can really start focus on upgrading your gear where possible and putting aspects on all of your gear at that point, because at level 50 you should mostly have aspects that are useful to you on all of your pieces if possible, because it just makes you that much more powerful. And if you compare yourself at level 50 or beyond with 0 aspects on your gear or only 1 or 2 compared to somebody that has aspects on every piece of gear possible, you're going to look like an absolute marshmallow. That being said, those are the 5 major mistakes I see people make all the time, including myself. If you feel like this helped you, make sure to drop a like on the video and let me know in the comments if you have any questions or I even said anything wrong. And make sure you check out this video on the left side of the screen or the right for more awesome Diablo content. Thank you guys. Peace.